All right, well, good morning.
Good morning.
And thanks for meeting with me today, Maria.
My pleasure.
Okay, so Maria, why don't we start out by having you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Maria Sioka, and I'm the Executive Director at Juniper Village at Naples, and we are a memory care community.
Awesome, very good. And so you and I talked a little bit before about working with employees, is right?
Yes.
And that's a big part of your job?
Yes, it's a very large part of my job because I'm responsible for ensuring that we're properly staffed by the state and making sure that we're compliant with the training.
Okay.
And that takes a lot of energy and focus.
And so you're responsible for hiring, training, and supervising lots of employees?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we talked a little bit about some of the things that you see, which are very common for employers, which we call soft skills or employability skills. So, so why don't we start by talking a little bit about that?
Sure.
Okay. So tell me, what kind of difficulties do you think that some employees bring to the workplace that make it difficult for them to be successful on the job?
Sure. The challenge, like behaviors.
Yes.
Some of the challenging behaviors are that they don't think it's important to follow the rules. Mm-hmm. And that's important.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Sure. Well, we're dealing with elderly people. And with elderly people, there's policies and procedures, approaches that need to be followed. There's time elements within a certain period of time. And the state puts forth regulations.
Okay.
And we do all this training prior to setting them free on the floor with the residents.
Sure.
So I might reiterate this, demonstrate it. They have opportunities to experience it hands-on, and then we have to set them free, and then they might choose to do their own thing and beat to their own drum. Not acceptable.
Right.
We can't have them know that they have to give somebody a bath on a Tuesday at 2 o'clock, and then they just choose not to do it with no reason.
Right.
That's a problem.
Right.
So let's say that bath wasn't able to be given for a reason. That needs to be communicated to a supervisor, not just you walk away, you clock out, and the next shift realizes that bath was not given.
Okay.
Those types of behaviors appear to be very common and acceptable in certain certain people who just don't think anything about that. It's that follow through. It's the behavior of following through and communicating.
Yeah, communicating seems to be a really big theme in a lot of the things that we've been talking about. So can you talk a little bit about what it means to you to have appropriate communication in a workplace?
Certainly. Appropriate communication in our particular workplace is perhaps someone like a caregiver identifies a change in behavior, which makes the caregiver's job a little harder to do. Then they need to communicate that change in behavior of that resident, because that could be a sign or symptom brewing that perhaps that resident needs a change in treatment or the doctor to see that resident.
Sure.
So in that case, that's communication specific to that resident. On a simpler note, maybe someone's break is designated at 10:15.
Right.
They need to communicate, hey, I'm going on my break at 10:15. I'll be back at 10:45. That's something as simple as that needs to occur. That's just common courtesy among peers.
Sure. Sure. That's a really big point. The between peers, between coworkers, communication between coworkers, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, relationships between coworkers or supervisors and their subordinates. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Certainly. This is just the mutual respect. Maybe someone needs, maybe there's in my situation, a caregiver that perhaps is more seasoned, and then another caregiver has not had as much experience. And they might need to ask for help. So it's a two-way street. So the communication is receptive and it's expressive. So that a caregiver that perhaps is unclear needs to feel comfortable asking those questions.
Sure.
And know that they have to ask the questions. The other caregiver might not read their mind.
Right.
So that's important. And then asking the supervisor for assistance if they feel that they can't get something done or it's a challenge or they don't understand. I always say, no question is dumb. Right. Ask the question 10 times until you get it right. That's fine. And I would tell you, the peers probably are more respectful if somebody asks the question than ignores it or walks away.
Right. Okay. What about, I know part of our conversation that we have all the time has to do with workplace drama between employees and gossip, and how does that work into your role? And
well, I have a rule, so I actually put it out there, and I can sit here and say no drama, but then I actually explain it.
Okay.
So sometimes it's cultural differences. So I prepare and educate people, my new hires, for cultural differences.
Okay.
And I prepare them for behaviors that they might experience on the first couple of weeks on the job. And I think if people are prepared, then they don't become so defensive or suspicious. So for instance, it's called in the nursing world, a lot of times it's called eating our young.
Okay.
So nurses, caregivers, seasoned caregivers might not be as tolerable of somebody coming in new,
sure.
right? So we eat our young, meaning we expect them to do, what we do.
Right.
The ones that are seasoned.
Right.
So I prepare the new ones coming on board for that philosophy.
Got it.
And then when you're prepared, you kind of accept it. You're not as defensive, and then that's where the ask questions comes in. So that's where I try to educate them and prepare them in advance. Now they have to take that information and utilize it and apply it.
Right.
And then on the back end, I try to re-educate the people that have been here for a while, sensitivity training.
Okay.
So if you start a job and you're new, how does that feel? So I give them scenarios about how does that feel if you're new on the job. Do you remember when you first started at a job?
Sure.
And when you do a little bit of sensitivity training on the what I call the back end, the people that have been here for a while, that also helps, and then they meet somewhere in between.
Okay.
And so that I believe minimizes the drama, because the drama typically comes from A, the lack of communication, and B, the lack of dialogue in terms of what's the proper procedure, or because the caregivers that have been here forever assume that the new ones should just know it.
Right. Okay, that's great.
And that's not just this community, that's wherever I've ever worked, because I think it's just the nature of
the workplace.
Yeah,
it's the
right,
nature of the
even
workplace.
probably retail, and it's probably what happens.
Absolutely. Okay, we talked a little bit earlier about time management skills.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit.
Certainly.
All right, so what have you seen, what have you noticed with people and managing their time?
Well, keep in mind we're a people business, and when you're working with people, meaning the residents, we're on their schedule. So time management is a challenge to begin with in a healthcare environment.
Sure.
So the staff need to anticipate or look for patterns of perhaps behaviors of the residents. It could be toileting, or somebody takes longer to eat. Then we have to anticipate that and work together with our other peers to accommodate that. And then so let's say their break is at 10:15, and then we're flexible. Their break is scheduled at 10:15. They can't just not take their break because it's a law. So then there's the communication comes in,
sure,
saying to their coworker, this resident took too long to eat. Now I'm taking my break at 10:30, or do you want to go now? And then that time, so the work all gets done. It's just a matter. All those pieces of the puzzle, the communication,
sure,
the respect,
sure,
it all ties in. So I think that time management is critical because it's a unified, they have to figure it out together.
Okay. And then also we were talking a little bit about before a person is hired, they say, yeah, I want all these hours.
Yes.
And then
they don't deliver.
And then they don't deliver.
People, I think, see the dollars at the end of the rainbow when they people give me hours. That's the phrase. I want hours. I want hours. So then we show them what's available. They book themselves, and then they'll be like, oh, I can't do that. I can't work that shift, and they don't give you enough notice.
Right.
So I think that's something that people need to realize, that when you don't show up for your job, or if you overbook yourself and you can't pick up that shift, the only one really suffering is the resident who needs the care. Right. And then we waste a lot of time shuffling the schedule. We don't work short, because I can't work short in terms of staffing because of the way we're set up. So then it's sloppy and inefficient, because then I need to go into overtime with somebody else that'll come in, and that affects their time management. So it's just very much of a domino effect.
Right.
So overcommitting and under-delivering from an employer's view, not a strategic way to advance in your career, and not a strategic way to, you're as good as your last job.
Right.
So, and in my case, I remember all that stuff.
Right.
Little tickler file.
Yeah, and you had mentioned too about like people not showing up for interviews and stuff, and then
very common.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps when people don't show up for their today, I had an example. So the gal was scheduled at 10 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
and I based my time management on her arriving at 10. When she didn't arrive at 10, then I had to move on to another task. When I came back, she was then here, and I said to her, "You were scheduled at 10. What happened?" And she explained it. I said, "Well, unfortunately, I have someone coming in at 11 now, and I can't accommodate you."
Right.
So in my eyes, then if someone can't get here for the interview, I'm not interested.
Right. That's really, really, really
and
important.
they need. So if they're going to be late or unable to make it, they should call in advance, not a half hour after the interview.
Sure. And then not showing up at all means
that shows lack of interest. Not showing up for an interview shows lack of interest,
Mm-hmm.
lack of respect.
Right. I think sometimes people are, something does come up,
Mm-hmm.
and they're more afraid of facing that and making that phone call,
Right.
And they just say, "Oh well, I blew it,"
Right. But
versus
a phone call in advance.
a phone call in advance. Right. Yes.
That's if you have the respect, then you're going to respect our residents. But if you're not respecting the person interviewing you, then I can't really roll the dice and
Mm-hmm.
consider you as a hire, because then what are you going to do to my residents who are really helpless and defenseless?
I think that's awesome. Okay, so I love the word respect,
Mm-hmm.
because no matter what the workplace situation, I think that's really, really an important quality for a person to have, whether it's with a client, a coworker, a supervisor,
Sure.
themselves as well. So let's wrap up with, what kind of advice would you give to a person who is beginning their career in their chosen field, whether it's healthcare or whether it's something else? Yeah.
Sure. My advice is
Mm-hmm.
something that I learned very early on.
Uh-huh.
Have clear, concise communication.
Mm-hmm.
Be consistent. Be respectful.
Beautiful.
That's
Very
it,
good.
in a nutshell. And then you're hired.
Awesome.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. It
This
was
is
a pleasure. Thank you for considering me.
All right, great.